Frisco, The Secret History, a podcast. Welcome to the Frisco, The Secret History podcast. I'm your host, Knox Bronson. I have a wonderful episode for you today, part 1 of the Dolly Fine story, one of Frisco's last great madams. Dolly was Frisco's most famous madam in the 1930s. She was tall, blonde, beautiful, always smartly dressed, streetwise, and gangster through and through. She ran an upscale house, made the right payoffs, and took very, very good care of her girls. Eventually, she ran up against the changing culture of the city, and by the end of the decade, she was gone. No one knows for sure where she went, but there were rumors that she had married quite well after getting out of the game. Frisco has celebrated its many madams since the gold rush. Let's name a few. Irene McCready, the first documented Frisco madam in the early gold rush years. Her partner was James McCabe, co-owner of the El Dorado gambling house at Kearney in Washington, where the daily take sometimes exceeded $200,000 in gold dust. Remember that money was not really used in San Francisco until the turn of the century. Gold was Frisco's currency of choice. Irene and James had a tumultuous marriage. One time, when they were on the outs, she lured him over to her place, perhaps with a promise of sex and reconciliation. She drugged his whiskey, and while he was out cold, shaved every square inch of his body. The tall, lithe toy, with her aristocratic and exotic lily-bound feet, who arrived from China at the age of 21 and set up shop in a shanty in an alley off Clay Street near Kearney. Sometimes there would be a block-long line of men waiting to get into it. The beautiful Arabella Ryan, who became Belle Cora when she married Charles Cora in the Frisco City Jail, where he was being held for murdering United States Marshal William Richardson. Drunk, Richardson had publicly insulted Arabella in the lobby of a Market Street theater in 1855. Charles shot him on the street several days later to defend her honor. I told this story in detail in the Call It Frisco Part 2, Sally Stanford Weighs In episode. Madam Maud Nelson Fair, whose marriage to the illegitimate son of a United States Senator made front-page news in 1893. Jessie Hayman, whom the Grand Duke of the Imperial Russian Empire begged to come with him when he had to return to Russia at the end of his visit to Frisco in the 1890s. She was described as having the figure and face of an empress, with the poise and manner of one as well. Tessie Wall, Frisco's favorite and best-liked madam in the early 1900s, who stood over her ex-husband's dead body in 1917 on Anna Street, an alley between Eddy and Ellis, and exclaimed, "I shot him because I loved him. God damn him." Maud Spencer and Reggie Gamble, who together ran a deluxe bordello on Mason Street. They went up against reformer Reverend Paul Smith as he campaigned to force the city to enforce the Red Light Abatement Act. The Reverend later went on a national tour with a feature film he had produced, The Finger of Justice, which was banned in New York. And when he showed the movie in Philadelphia, the city issued a warrant for his arrest, forcing him to flee in a hurry. He eventually left the ministry, became a car salesman. In later years, he lamented his campaigns against prostitution. You can see the finger of justice at the Frisco The Secret History website. In the 1930s, Dolly Fine came into her own as Frisco's preeminent madam. Sally Stanford, whom we all know and love, was operating at the same time, but it was Dolly who captured the headlines in the 30s. Little is known about Dolly Fine's beginnings. 12 years before she came to the attention of Edwin Atherton and the San Francisco grand jury, Dolly, as a teenager and precocious gangster mole in training, acted as a lookout when her gang committed crimes. In the township of Pacifica, just south of San Francisco on the coast, she worked for smugglers during Prohibition. There are several references to this, but it's unclear what she did for them. Suffice it to say that Dolly knew on which side of the law she stood at a very early age. As the Examiner wrote in 1938, police, probing into the path, dredged up the records of a bandit gang which operated in 1925 and found that Dolly Fine, under a string of aliases, was the mole of that gang. And the 3 men sought yesterday, police asserted, were members of the gang who have stood closely by while Dolly Fine prospered and became the woman in red, keeper of San Francisco's most profitable brothel. All 3 men have long police records, have served jail terms. One of the 3, police say, is Lawrence Bryan, alias Lawrence Bunger, known extensively in underworld circles as Al Brady. He is a Folsom graduate. Folsom being Folsom Prison, of course. Brady, police believe, is actually the brother of Dolly Fine. The other 2 were Fred Dutch Fritchen and Irby Hunt. These 3, together with William Melody, who was later shot to death in Chicago, were arrested in 1925 on charges of holding up Dr. Gabor Konigstein, chiropodist, better known as Kingstone, in his office at 101 Post Street. The chiropodist and 2 patients were gagged and trussed up tightly. $5,000 worth of diamonds and rubies were stolen. 2 women were implicated. One was Dorothy Ryan. The other was Julia White, alias Julia Black, a young dancer. Julia White, or Black, police discovered yesterday, grew up to be the woman now known as Dolly Fine. Lawrence Bryan, supposed brother of Dolly Fine, stood trial and was acquitted. Fritchen and Hunt escaped trial. Melody went to prison. Dorothy Ryan vanished. Their victims, then a prominent boxing promoter, and as a man who had had 6 wives and was swamped by applicants when he advertised for a 7th, passed from the public scene. All were forgotten until Dolly Fine, madam of a Bush Street brothel, jumped $1,000 bail and was indicted. Yesterday, police remembered and began looking for the 3 men who knew Julia White and might be expected to know where Dolly Fine is now in deep seclusion. I will discuss Dolly's flight from justice, which made nationwide front-page news in the next episode. The chiropodist, Dr. Konigstein, or Kingstone, was quite a character himself, an only in Frisco type of character, and I will be doing an episode on him at some point. Dolly Fine's business card read D. Fine, contractor, 1275 Bush Street, near Larkin, Office 2, Ordway 1, 555, San Francisco. Dolly was one of Frisco's great madams, her reign stretching across most of the 1930s. Her exquisitely appointed houses of frolic were filled with companionable women of great beauty. Dolly was herself a tall, striking blonde. Dolly took good care of her girls. On paper, she ran a house cleaning service, and the girls were her employees. She set up Social Security accounts for them and religiously made regular payments into their accounts. She offered the girls profit sharing, which was almost unheard of in the love trade. She had another house in Pacifica, just south of San Francisco on the coast, where she and some of the girls would sometimes vacation for a few days. She ran a clean house, made all the appropriate payoffs, and had the best defense lawyer in town, if not the nation, Jake, the Master Ehrlich. I wonder when in this podcast can I just start referring to him as the Master. He referred to himself as the Master, a true San Franciscan. Straight up Frisco. San Francisco had a long history of brotherly and sisterly tolerance for gambling, prostitution, and a vibrant nightlife since the gold rush days. If you haven't listened to my episode, Vice Defined San Francisco's DNA at its inception, I recommend it. These episodes are episodic, not serial, so they can be listened to in any order. Since Dolly's reign as a madam was the 1930s, we must talk about the Atherton Report, which shook the city to its core as well. I wrote in the episode, The Hawaiian Princess Who Wanted to Sing, about Alice Kamokilai Kauai Campbell, who ran the Kilokawa Club on Bush Street, home of live music so the princess could sing, and a bounty of accommodating women in hula skirts. When the press got to her in the corridor, she made a suggestion that wound up on page 1 and that ultimately had more effect on the grand jury than anything she'd said inside. San Francisco is on trial, she declared. When the community is not courageous, it must expect vice and crime. When one has to pay for respectability, it does not seem fair. Let all good and patriotic citizens band together, raise $100,000, hire a private investigator, and clean up the city. The little chanteuse from Honolulu had just done the most effective singing of her career. The princess didn't stick around for the fireworks. She suddenly decided to marry her voice coach, a gentleman named Blickfelt, and took off for her native Hawaii. The grand jury report thought it over and got $100,000 with which to hire Edwin Atherton, a former FBI agent and now a private investigator. Atherton knew precisely what to do with $100,000 and a city that was wide open for a practical peeper. I am fairly certain that the princess just wanted the cops and the necessary payouts out of the equation. She did not want anything shut down. The princess had been called into the grand jury after she had called the city's chief of police and asked if she were being charged too much protection money by the police and the McDonough graft machine. Others attribute the hiring of the ex-G-man and his crew to some ill-advised remarks made at a Rotary Club luncheon around the same time. Kurt Gentry wrote in his book, The Madams of San Francisco, the Atherton investigation was touched off one afternoon in November 1935 amidst the seemingly non-combustible surroundings of a Rotary Club luncheon in suburban San Rafael. The speaker was John V. Lewis, Bay Area collector of Internal Revenue. The chance remarks he dropped were two: that the madam of one San Francisco house of prostitution had attempted to deduct her payoffs to the police as a legitimate operating expense, and that some former policemen, as a result, were not paying income taxes. Humorous little asides. But an alert news reporter picked up the story and began his own investigation. Among other things finding, he said, a police captain who had earned $100,000 from prostitution. The newspapers put on the pressure. Mayor Angelo Rossi, who had come into office in 1931 after James Rolfe was elected governor of California, ordered the district attorney to investigate. Now, everyone in San Francisco had known and boasted for years that the city was wide open and that the police took bribes, wrote local crime reporter Charles Radabaugh in the San Francisco chapter of Robert S. Allen's Our Fair City. For an official to discuss it right out in the open was embarrassing, to say the least. Mr. Lewis's blabbermouthing mushroomed into a face-saving investigation by District Attorney Matthew Brady. Matt wasn't mad at anyone, but he certainly could not be left out holding the bag, as the saying goes. He hired Edwin Atherton, a former G-man, to dig into the situation. Many, however, anticipated a quick surface skimming. District Attorney Brady, without notifying Chief Quinn or the police commission, enlisted Atherton to conduct a secret graft inquiry into the SFPD. Atherton was a handsome former G-man with the open smile of a casket salesman, as one newspaper reported. In rapid succession, Atherton set up posh headquarters in the Keystone Apartments on Nob Hill's west side and began spending the city's money as fast as he could. San Franciscans had a laissez-faire attitude toward prostitution and gambling in the city, but they did not want their noses rubbed in the amount of graft involved to keep the wheels turning. There was a fine line they did not want crossed, or at least of which to be made aware of. Money for sex, okay. Paying the McDonough brothers a large fee for permission to set up shop and making monthly payouts to local beat cops, no. When the amount of graft was ultimately revealed, it shocked the city. This strange revulsion to graft, or at the absence of plausible deniability in their fair city, was what fueled the hiring of Atherton and then his ongoing investigation. Needless to say, any number of civic reformers, like the aforementioned minister, movie producer, and car salesman Paul Smith, elbowed their way into the spotlight to fan the flames of manufactured outrage for personal gain. Naturally, the grand jury at one point subpoenaed Dolly to come in to testify. She did not accept the subpoena willingly. When Atherton arrived at her door, she refused to open it. He summoned 4 policemen, who arrived with pliers and a hacksaw. She wouldn't let Atherton into her place until they started to attack the door chain with the hacksaw. As the Oakland Tribune reported, Dolly Fine, comely blonde, identified by the investigator as keeper of a Bush Street brothel, did not deny any of the purported conversations with Rice and other persons at the McDonough brothers, but said she couldn't remember any of them. She became tearful when asked if she operated a house of prostitution, and refused to answer on the grounds her reply might incriminate and degrade her. The comely brothel keeper, as one paper described her, was no Tessie Wall. A blue-eyed, statuesque blonde in her early 30s, well-groomed and conservatively dressed, she bore little resemblance in either speech or appearance to the wine-guzzling madams of yore. She was not a willing witness. Question: what time do you usually go to bed at night? Answer: well, at different times, any time from 11 to 2 or 3. Question. Anytime business becomes slack? Answer. I don't know what you mean. Question. I mean when there are no patrons coming into the establishment. Answer. I still don't know what you mean. Question. Isn't it a fact for the last year you have been operating a house of prostitution in the city and county of San Francisco? Answer. That question I refuse to answer, sir. Question. The only ground upon which you can refuse to answer, Miss Fine, is upon the grounds of self-incrimination, or that the answer will have a tendency to degrade your character. Answer. That would degrade my character, that's certain. Question. I am going to ask you if you remember this conversation. Madeline, this is Dolly. What's doing? And Madeline said, I had a date. I could have used Lou tonight. Wanted something Chinese. Do you know of anybody I could get? And you said, no, but I'll try to find someone for you. Miss Fine recalled neither this nor any other telephone conversations. The Atherton Report, released on March 17, 1937, was nothing short of sensational, casting a harsh, revealing light upon the underbelly of San Francisco, a city renowned for its picturesque beauty and vibrant culture. The report detailed a sophisticated and deeply ingrained system of extortion that generated an estimated $1 million annually in payouts to the police, about $30 million today. Not bad for a city of 647,000. The primary sources of this illicit revenue were the city's bordellos and illegal gambling joints. A particularly damning aspect of the Atherton Report was its focus on the McDonough brothers bail bond company. The report identified the McDonoughs as a central pillar of the city's corruption network, labeling them a fountainhead of corruption. Their influence extended far beyond simply posting bail. The Atherton investigation revealed that the McDonoughs enjoyed an alarmingly close relationship with members of the SFPD, including high-ranking officers. They allegedly received information about upcoming raids, allowing their clients, often involved in organized crime, to evade arrest or minimize the consequences. The release of the Atherton Report sent shockwaves through San Francisco. The public, long aware of the city's seedy underbelly, was nonetheless stunned by the sheer scale and systemic nature of the corruption within their police force. Hundreds of officers faced reassignment or dismissal for conduct unbecoming an officer. 3 captains, 3 lieutenants, and 1 sergeant were fired. 5 officers were indicted, but none were convicted in a court of law. As Dolly once remarked, there is only one mob in San Francisco, the police. Dolly survived the grand jury, but clearly there had been a sea change in the official view of Frisco Vice. She moved operations to a new building and kept operating. Sally Stanford kept operating, along with dozens of other horror houses, gambling joints, and after-hours clubs that had long dotted the city landscape like scrumptious mushrooms. In his wonderful memoir, A Life in My Hands, attorney Jake Ehrlich, may I say the master? In his wonderful memoir, A Life in My Hands, the master wrote, "Everybody made money with Dolly, including me. As I have said, Dolly was one of those who came to me when the McDonough heat really began to get hot under her business career. She asked me for an evaluation of the situation, and I told her that there was no more situation, that vice was through in San Francisco. She then asked me what to do, and I told her to fold her sheets and blankets and fade away. Apparently, the advice she bought so expensively from me matched neither her wishful thinking nor her plans, for she stayed right with the situation and kept her bedding at its usual uses. Even when she was called to testify before the grand jury, she wasn't too perturbed, although I explained to her that the best she could get as a result of such an invitation was an unpleasant and unprofitable draw. And there were other possibilities of an even uglier nature if she should make the not uncommon feminine mistake of verbally fudging a bit while under oath. Blithely, she appeared before the jurors, clad in a chic outfit and wearing a demure smile. There is no question but what Dolly was lovely and had splendid taste in clothes. There is also no question but what her calling was well known to one and all, which made her coy disclaimers about knowledge of certain seamy things a little hard for the jurors to take. When they asked her about the times when her business became slack, she just didn't know what they meant and said it in just those words. Questioned about her patrons, she was baffled at the meaning of this word in connection with her. She was equally disingenuous in respect to all embarrassing questions. But she hadn't fooled anyone, and when her responses and attitude were reported in the newspapers, the weight of official and public opinion began to stack against her. I said she hadn't fooled anyone, but now that I think about it, I have to admit that I am wrong. She fooled herself. As intelligent a woman as she was, she had accepted the courtroom defeats of Atherton and the rain check given her by the grand jury as proofs that the status was going to remain pretty quo in San Francisco, particularly if time gave her a little leeway. Atherton turned in his final report in May of 1937, picked up his terminal paycheck, plus a generous dollop of money to cover an underestimated budget for information, and departed the city by the Golden Gate forever. The investigator's final report was on the melancholy side. He admitted that he had accomplished little and blamed, among others, the mayor. In making the statement that this investigation was not supported by public officials, I have Mayor Rossi in mind. He also felt the grand jury, which hired him, had not been constant in its love for him. The investigation, in his hindsight estimate, had a synthetic beginning and was unwanted by any large proportion of the public. When the reporters saw him off to Los Angeles at the Southern Pacific Depot, they asked if he thought he'd done any good in San Francisco. Dolefully, he shook his head. "It'll all wind up a whitewash," he said, thus documenting himself as a regulation bad loser and managing to cast vague aspersion upon the innocence of Ludolf and the others who were vindicated by due process, juror unanimity, and Ehrlichian eloquence. This refers to some of the policemen who were found acquitted after indictment. The press and some of the less prescient of the politicians took the attitude that $100,000 worth of nothing had been accomplished, and even the far-flung Saturday Evening Post said that from the perspective of the city of brotherly love, it was quite clear that San Francisco didn't want to be cleaned up. One of the few really concerned persons who was convinced of all this chatter was my client Dolly. Despite a somewhat cloudy condition in the climate of San Francisco's nightlife, Dolly closed her moderately pretentious place at 555 Hyde Street. It's really alive at 555, as some unknown cab driver poet put it, and took a 5-year lease on a more elegant establishment at 1275 Bush Street, a few blocks west of the fated Camokilla Club. Blithely, she invested $20,000 in furnishings, and before long was doing an earth-shaking business. If a record of 6 courtesy arrests in the next 6 months is any criterion. Fines levied for all 6 pinches totaled $75. I should mention that when I began studying this part of this San Francisco history 50 years ago, an old newsman told me that the bordellos had to be raided periodically so it would look like they were doing something about vice. They would get warned so they could get the men out of there. They'd haul the madam and a few of the girls down to the Hall of Justice. Some fines would be paid. At least one newspaper photographer would get one of the girls to hike up her skirt and snap a few pictures. These pictures would be slipped into a pile the next morning at the San Francisco Examiner, so that when Bill Wren, the editor, who was Bones Remmer's natural enemy, went through the pile of pictures for that day's editions, he would have a couple of pin-up shots to break the monotony. It was all part of the game. And that happened over and over again. Okay, back to the master. But on April 24th, 1938, her roof fell in. I was at the Beverly Wilshire in Los Angeles at the time and had just retired when my telephone rang. It was Dolly's voice, but I could sense the presence of others at her end of the line from her first words onward. "I'm in trouble, Jake. Deep trouble. You've been arrested and it's for more than just the usual things?" "Right. Will you represent me?" "Of course I would," I replied, and gave her the age-old litany of the defense attorney. "Have nothing at all to say until you see me. Make bond, smile prettily, but silently at the press, and then make yourself scarce to one and all. I'll see you as soon as I can." I'll be back soon with part 2 of the Dolly Fine story. Her arrest for corrupting the morals of minors, her flight from prosecution, the nationwide hunt for Dolly, the headlines, her dramatic return to face trial, and Jake Ehrlich's masterful moves that ultimately saved her from 8 felony convictions. Frisco, The Secret History, is a listener-supported podcast. Main episodes will always be free. Our website is www.friscothesecrethistory.com. Visit the website for transcripts and show notes. Paid tier members, starting at as little as $5 a month, will receive bonus episodes and other perks of membership. There is a $1 tier, but that will simply give you ad-free episodes when I get some advertisers. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends about it, especially those who enjoy San Francisco or true crime history. Word of mouth is the absolute best means of promotion for any creative endeavor in this world of algorithms and the ceaseless barrage of ads, notifications, and appeals on every digital platform. If you are aware of some particular aspect of San Francisco history in the 30s and 40s you would like me to research or have a story to tell, please let me know. Once again, I'm your host, Knox Bronson. Thank you for listening. Until next time, please get a little crazy and call it Frisco.